quick.
We're doing
Let's
it.
do it.
So, Sandy and our live audience,
Hi.
welcome to the Substantial Podcast. So
happy to be here.
Yes, me too. Can I just say that I'm really happy that you are our first one, our first interviewee.
Yeah,
Right.
that's right.
Just because I've always just admired you. All the things that you say, I just feel like are something that inspires, and just I admire your work. I admire what you do. I admire the way that you carry yourself as a realtor, but also before that, just as I actually even remember what you did before realty.
You know, I mean, I can't say I didn't do anything because I always felt like I've been busy, but it was more really family and church things. I volunteered everywhere I could,
and that's where I saw you. I definitely saw you at the church all the time, doing your thing.
Yeah.
And so the idea behind the Substantial Podcast is that we are focused on young adult, small business owners, entrepreneurs, people who are out there who maybe want to start a side hustle, maybe want to launch a business, maybe they want to launch a multi-million-dollar business, and that's their goal.
Yeah.
And so I feel like a lot of podcasts out there, their focus or business YouTube channels are out there like telling you how to get rich. You know what I mean? And
100%.
Exactly. And a lot of it's very vague information. And I wanted to kind of hone in on people's first 5 years of business, which you may be familiar, I'm sure you are. If you can make it those first 5, you're doing really well.
Right.
And if you can make it through those first 5, chances are you're going to do really well with your business. It's going to stay consistent.
Correct.
And so my family's had a business, a jewelry store in California. It's called Valencia Jewelry. And they have been in business for 45 years.
That's terrific.
Yeah. And so my grandpa just started on this little booth fixing people's watches on the side of the street. And it turned into a shop, and then a bigger shop, and then a bigger shop, and then now this giant building.
So it's born in you.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
When I was a little kid, it was funny. When I was a little kid, they started me working there as like 5 years old.
Sure.
Right? And I was like, out of all the kids, I was the only one that was there at 5 years old. All the rest of them didn't go to this jewelry store until they were like 12.
Right.
And so when you work in a jewelry store, there are diamonds and gemstones everywhere, right? And so, they fall on the floor. And so I would get these tweezers. And my job was to go into the carpet and scrape through the carpet until diamonds would pop out.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and so to collect all the ones that fell on the floor.
Sure. Just now hit me when you said that. My dad had a business. My dad was in produce.
Really?
And he was an only child, and his dad did produce. But he started young age picking grapes and, out in the fields and things like that. His dad died when he was 8, and he ended up quitting school so that he could take care of his mom. And he did it. It was all different types of things, but produce based.
Yeah.
And long story short, through him, I was born in California.
Really?
In Inglewood. Yeah. He was working for Hughes Aircraft, kind of self-taught in the computer field of all things. But really God brought us all back to Texas, and he started working in produce again. So my first job, everybody worked at Vickers T&L Produce because that's where, it was Dad's place. So my brother worked there. We all worked there. And, one of my jobs one time, I wasn't picking diamonds. But I was picking rotten tomatoes out of similar. It was a diamond, but still you do. And, very quite possibly, I think that's probably, for sure, it's where I've gotten my work ethic. For sure. And I'm sure you too.
Of course, yeah,
right?
Absolutely. The hustle. Like you just, you see your parents, especially the parents who kind of inherit the business, after something happens with one of their family members, that sometimes like the obligation of feeling like you have to,
right?
You know what I mean? And really, it's more like feeling. It's more than just feeling. Sometimes you do have to, but they work hard. I'm sure your parents busted their butts.
Oh my gosh! And produce back in the day before HEB and all, they all buy direct now, but before Dad was that middleman.
Yeah.
And so they come pick up their loads at 2-3 o'clock in the morning, so Dad would have to get there between 1 and 2 in the morning to make sure all the orders were ready to go, and the trucks would back up to the dock and they'd load them up. And he'd kind of end the day about 2 or 3, but it It was not easy work at all, at all. But he was very successful, and that's what put us all through college and got us our first cars and all of those kinds of things. But we also knew that Dad wasn't sitting back, just he was working for it.
What do you feel like you gained besides just a work ethic, which I think is probably the most important thing?
Mm-hmm.
What are some things that you feel like you may have gained from seeing your parents and working with your family, and also being somebody there working with your hands?
Yeah.
What do you feel like you gained from that?
It may not always go beautifully. It may not always work the first time. And it may be a really yucky, crappy day. And then there may be a great day. And then they all kind of add up to success.
Yeah.
And I think what you alluded to a little earlier with this is how you get rich kind of thing. I think we kind of change people's views of you wake up and it's there. And
Absolutely.
it's not.
Yeah.
It's my husband's a physician and he's very successful, but we got married when he was in med school, and I watched the long nights, and we went through basically not even, after we got married, living together for long periods of time, because he'd be at the hospital so much or whatever. You just don't wake up and then boom, you're there.
Absolutely. You don't have to practice.
Yeah.
Like it takes
and it's about the tenacity of going, okay, this is going to be a culmination of some great days, some bad days, some days that I'm gonna have to figure out a lot of things, some days that maybe things will come easy. I don't know. But if we just look at what the goal is, and that through all of those different stages, the good, the bad, the ugly, the wonderful, whatever, we just keep a great attitude. You're gonna make it. It's just, I think sometimes we want things a little bit easier than maybe
For sure.
they actually are.
Maybe I did this and most young adults don't, but I'm pretty sure they do. When I got right out of high school, I immediately started a multi-level marketing company, or was a part of a multi-level marketing company. Some people call them pyramid schemes. I don't think that they're pyramid schemes, but it was a get rich quick. And of course, my father, very knowledgeable, has been doing business for a long time. He understood you don't get rich quick. You don't. And so he always tried to guide me and tell me, but as a young person, he was really stubborn.
Sure.
Which is, I really think most people when they're between 17, 16, and 24, they're stubborn. They think,
I can do this better.
Better than anybody else.
I think,
so,
yeah.
And so I learned a lot from my dad, but not till I matured, right? Because I hear that men mature at 26, women mature at 24, but probably even younger. Everybody talks about getting rich, and they don't really talk about the ugly side. Right. Or they do talk about the ugly side, but they make it seem like it's easy to get through.
Right.
And really, in the end, it's just a grind. It's just work.
It is.
Over a long period of time.
It is.
And it doesn't not necessarily have to be working at a job, right? Because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about business.
Right.
You can hustle. And I think my biggest encouragement to people, so during the pandemic, I'm sure you saw this, there were people who busted their butt during the pandemic when everybody else sat on their butt on the couch, which I'm not gonna lie, I did that too, don't get me wrong. I got a lot of Netflix binging, don't get me wrong, what I mean? But there were a lot of people who took that time and maybe they went to the gym while nobody else was there.
Right.
Or they worked out however, out in the grass.
Right.
And they got ripped. They got their gains.
Right.
Or the people who started their businesses and they took that opportunity to do everything marketing. Maybe they can't go out and talk to customers, but they have everything digital done.
Right.
And those people took that opportunity. And so what I really want to do with this podcast is, and also our Entrepreneur Collective group, is to push people to take this summer, at the very least, just this summer. I was a wrestler, and so wrestler is just one, right?
Right.
And so while the other guy isn't training at 6 in the morning, if you're training at 6 in the morning, you have another hour or two of work every single day than he does, and that's how you're going to beat the guy.
100%.
Absolutely, and I think that 100% applies to our business.
Yeah.
And that's what I really want people to do, is I really want people to tune into this podcast.
Right.
Get the lessons, learn the things that you need to do, the experience, the fun stories that I know you're going to tell because you're an incredible storyteller. So overall, that's what our podcast is about. So we'll start. We'll just start from the beginning. So we talked a little bit about your business, your family's business.
He's retired. He retired some time back. He actually ended up getting into the restaurant business. So you know where
Yeah.
the youth, that used to be, it was a Tom's Ribs. So that was
Did you say-
originally my dad's restaurant. It's
That was
called
your
Rosie's
dad's business?
Haciendas. Which is
Wow.
my sister's name. She lives in heaven, and he named it after her. And so they went, and my mom was a phenomenal cook. And she worked at the ministry, and she would just make like breakfast tacos and stuff.
Breakfast tacos is such a San Antonio thing.
It is, right?
Because you're from Inglewood.
I-
Ain't nobody eating
Oh, no.
breakfast tacos.
Well,
and
I
coffee.
did only because my mom would make
Got
it
it,
for
yeah.
me. So I did
Yeah.
have Texas up, but no,
Yeah,
he did
San
not
Antonio,
find.
all
No.
about
It's
barbacoa
the-
and breakfast tacos.
Exactly. There was this little shack, if you will, but it had a kitchen. And she kind of she'd go in there at noontime and make food, and people would come by plates, and she was like killing it. It was going great.
Yeah.
And so they decided, you know what, this is really great. They opened a restaurant.
Yeah.
And again, I think because they had that business and entrepreneur,
Acting.
as two Hispanic people, children of immigrants, right? They didn't even call it that.
Yeah.
It was just like, I'm good at this.
Let's
Let's
do
see
it.
what we can do.
Yeah, people like it.
Yeah, and so they started a restaurant, and I will tell you, it was very, very successful, but it was just too much work, and they were already older, and
For sure.
so yeah, so then they just got out. Dad ended up, because he could not retire, he's too, you know,
Yeah.
they work, what would they
Absolutely.
do if they didn't work?
Oh my gosh.
And so he ended up getting a job at the courthouse helping, interestingly, people with their deeds for their house when they had to come find their deeds for whatever reason. He was in that department. And ended up retiring from there and has a great old retirement. So, I mean, he worked until he was probably 70, 75, something like that.
Yeah. My grandma, she is technically the owner. I think she is the owner of the jewelry store. She's probably 70 something. She still works there.
Yeah.
And she loves it.
Yeah.
I mean, she's the queen in the
Yeah,
business.
and it keeps you going.
Absolutely.
Right.
And you know, our family's always like, "Hey, you should probably stay home." She does not want to stay.
No.
home. Not at all. And I definitely-
That's when they start not doing well, I think. Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, loss of purpose. I
Sure.
feel like,
Sure.
you know, deteriorate. That's just.
Yeah.
But she's a hustler, and she's probably the hardest working person that I
I
know.
love it.
Look at this. I got my iPad and your giant photo.
It's really scary.
That's what I'm looking at the whole time.
Very scary.
So, I remember I'd gone to one of your parties, and I just remember hosting. You were so good at hosting,
Thank you.
and I feel like that was one of my favorite things about you. One of the things I respect about you so much, because personally, and I think that you respect things more when you actually try them and you're not good at them, and then you want to grow and be better at them.
Yeah.
You see what people who are great at them. And so one of my favorite things now is hosting. I love hosting parties. I love hosting people at the house.
I know you do. I
And,
know.
yeah, and my house is kind of like the central hub where all our
Right.
friends come together.
Right.
All friends from ministry, by the way.
Right.
You know, all great, incredible people who met their wives in ministry. You know, my favorite part is hosting. To
Yeah.
make everything special
Right.
for people. For example, we'll have their birthday at our house or we'll do something. And I kind of try my best to take charge in making sure that it's a memorable moment in
Correct.
some way, shape, or form.
Right.
And so I got a little bit of that from going to your house,
Oh, that's
because that was before I got married, before I had my
Right.
own home.
Right.
Could you tell me, how is hosting important? Why is hosting so important to you, man? How would you say that relates to business?
Again, I have to go back to my parents. You know, my mom always, she loved to cook, and she loved to cook for other people. That was something that was really, she loved doing. And we were that house growing up that all the kids on the block would come to on Friday nights. She taught us how to play poker.
Yeah.
I mean, we played poker with pennies, and you know, she would
Yeah.
make food, and it was just kind of a happy place to be. So I would watch that. My sister did a lot of it then too. She's a few years older than me, but I kind of watched her. Interestingly, I thought I kind of was the person that didn't get that gift. I just thought, I was a bit intimidated because they were such great cooks and so good at hosting and all that. And I thought, well, I'll find my niche,
Absolutely.
kind of thing. And, I think I just hosted, I think it probably started with kids, when my kids were growing up, and I kind of wanted to be the house that everybody wanted to come to, like my mom's.
Absolutely.
And it would go from there, and when family members, either were getting married or having babies or graduating, I'm like, well, let me do a little something for you. And it just kind of evolved. And,
Absolutely.
And then we built a house out 281 years ago in 2000. And we purposely built it. At that time, too, the church was really doing great outreaches with our, home ministry groups or whatever. And we were part of that. And so, where people would do the potlucks, I'm like, I'll just make everything, you know, and so I just got really used to that. So anyway, so we built that house thinking we need to build it and we had very wide open spaces so that, because we knew already that when people come, they congregate in the kitchen, right? And so we made sure our kitchen was very much the middle of the hub of everything. And then it just kind of grew from there. And I think that one of the first big things, I think it was Lizzie Gross and Roberto Aranabar from our church got married, and they were like needing a venue and couldn't find a venue. And I'm like, let's have the wedding here. Let's do the reception here. And I think once you do a wedding reception, you're kind of like, I can do anything now. And it kind of went from there. Yeah. And I think we've probably hosted, between that house and the house we're in now, I want to say 4 or 5 weddings.
What?
Full weddings.
My goodness. Who else's wedding have you done?
Phenomenal. So during COVID, my sister-in-law's, my nephew lives in California, and they could not find a place to do a wedding. And even in the places that they were like, well, you need to pay this deposit, but we still don't know if things are going to open or close, and we're not going to. Long story short. And they lived in California, and they were just going to do a family wedding. And we're like, well, come on. Yeah. And so they did. It was awesome. I mean, we even rented little pews and had pews, and it was great. Emptied my living room and made it a little banquet hall. And one of Scott's partners, they renewed their vows, and they needed a place to do it. They told us what they wanted. We'd like kind of the classical quartet, string quartet. We're like, we can do that. And so, I mean, and then a real good friend of mine from choir, she had been through a divorce, and God just brought her together with another divorced man at Cornerstone. And they're like, well, we don't want to do anything real big. And I'm like, so I kind of, it's almost here. Like an exciting thing for me.
Yeah,
so
me
I've
too,
done
honestly.
Countless showers, baby showers, wedding showers, all that, but probably my favorite thing to do are weddings. Yeah,
you're gonna have to start a wedding venue.
They're really pretty, and I've told a couple, especially kind of one of the ways we started at one of our houses was Scott was working with a nurse, and she said, she was living with her fiance. She goes, we just can't afford to get married. It's just too expensive. And Scott says, well, I'll host the wedding at my house for free if you get married. Kind of called her bluff a little, and she's like, okay. And we had that. I think that might have been our first wedding. No, I think Lizzie's, but then we had that. We said, we've had a wedding. So all of Scott's office, all the people and the doctors that worked in the office, we all pitched in together and had this great wedding for her. And, it's just, it brings us so much joy. It really does. And God has really provided us really just great properties that, are conducive to that. And that's what we look for. And we always say when we get a home, it's like, God, this is, help use it how you would like us. And we hope that we're the correct vessels to pull off what you want us to. And it's been awesome.
How is that translated over to your business?
I really feel like, it helps me when I walk into a home and I'm trying to help people, decide, is this the one or whatever, I always try to find out what is it that they want to accomplish in the home. Are they looking for, do they have big families that they're going to have over for Thanksgiving, or do they even really need a formal living room? What's most important? And I do feel like having that kind of hospitality mentality in that I do so much out of the home that I can kind of help them to envision different things. Because there's a lot of times we'll talk through something and go, oh, well, I never thought of that, you know, or, why don't you take this and, you don't really need this room, but if you could use this room for this, and, and I think that's because of I'm kind of always envisioning what's the most I can do with this house?
Yeah.
And so I hope that I'm able to help my clients, figure that out,
Yeah.
knowing what their goals are.
So, question for you. I've noticed in sales in general, there's a point where you no longer really have to do the cold calling, the cold acquiring,
Right.
where you are at a place where you've done such a good job at building people who trust you,
Right.
and they'll always refer you, and you
Right.
have just enough business with just referrals
Right.
where you don't have to be out there doing these other things.
Right. When I get some of these marketing calls, what do?
Yeah,
Right?
for sure.
We
Absolutely.
we hit end.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I'm like, do I want to be that person? Because I know a lot of agents who won't show for rental houses, and I do. I mean, I helped you with yours,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
I do, and I have gotten more referrals from rentals than probably I would if I made cold calls. Case in point, there was this actually, he's a gentleman who used to do a radio show. He's a psychologist and used to do a radio show in Dallas and wanted to move to the San Antonio area, but he just didn't really know the area. And he's like, I don't want to buy yet. Very well-to-do man. He had a very successful, still does, has a very successful practice. And he tried to get a rental house, and nobody would show him rentals. Like nobody would. They were like, no, we don't like to show. And he kind of bounced around and with the brokerage I was at before, he bounced around all these people, and they were like, okay, there's this guy who wants to see rentals and nobody wants to show him. I'm like, I'll show him. I've got all day, all weekend, So I showed him couple rentals. He found one he loved. He had quite a few dogs, so we had to get through a lot of red tape. Got him through all the red tape. When it came time for that you get kind of almost like a finder's fee. I'm like, I'd rather you just take it off of their pet deposit or whatever, that's fine. And they were like kind of blown away. They're like, nobody would even answer our phone calls. And you've kind of, I'm like, well, I love what I do.
Yeah.
I love looking at houses, so why not, and I'm happy you found your house. So not only within the year did they decide that they loved this house so much, and it was a nice house that they bought it.
Yeah.
And I think total, I've gotten 4 or 5 referrals out of him for a total of, I think I counted it up, but I was pretty close to almost like 3.5 million in referrals from him.
So can I say, I think the obvious of what you're saying is sometimes in a industry, there are things that people neglect.
100%.
And if you can find and capitalize on those things.
100%.
Absolutely.
And for me, it's not in cold calling. It's like in maybe doing the things that maybe some people think are beneath them or whatever.
Exactly.
And I'm like, because I constantly, and I hate that I even get this question. People are like, I only want to, I can only spend $200,000. And I'm like, great, let's go find you a house for $200,000 or for $175 maybe and save you some money, And they're kind of shocked. And I'm like, no, that's what I do.
Yeah.
I want to find, and I've promised when I started this business to find people homes. And however that happens to be, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
And, I got a very nice referral because I'd been referred a client and I called her, and she was an older woman. She lived in California. She had a rental, like a investment, and she decided she wanted to finally sell it. Well, apparently one of her family members, someone had talked to another agent. And so I get this very angry phone call that says, I already got this deal and you can't have the deal. And I'm said, hey, no problem, And this poor sweet woman called me. She was crying and she goes, I feel so horrible that I have to choose between you and this other agent. I said, no, ma'am, you don't have to do that. You go with her.
For sure.
That's the right thing. I said, I'll make it easy for you. I'm bowing out. And she goes, I can't even believe that you would do that. I'm like, that's just who I am. I'm not going to be that person.
Would you say that is the Christian in you?
Absolutely. It was just, and she was blown away. I will tell you, within 2 weeks, the agent called me and she goes, I am not getting along with this lady. You take the deal. We had her house sold in about a week.
Yeah.
She trusted me so much at that point. I went and paid all of her bills for her. I took care of everything on this end for her, and then obviously said, okay, you can close the account. You can get your money out. And that came from me going, here, you take it. And again, not to sound trite, but what would Jesus do? And how would he? And he would go, here, you do it.
And then also doing the things that many of the people in your industry feel like that it's beneath them. A mentor of mine, he said, if you're too big to do the little things, you'll be too little to get the big things.
And I agree with that.
100%. Hey friends, we have a podcast going on right now live on Instagram. I would greatly, greatly, greatly appreciate you to consider tuning in. It is with my friend here, Sandy Farhart. You may recognize her from the church. She sings in the choir. She works for Keller Williams Realty. And she's probably just one of the most influential people that I've ever met. Incredible woman. And we're talking small business. Our podcast is called The Substantial Podcast and is a Christian small business podcast for people who are in their first 5 years of business. If that's where you're at, or you just want to be encouraged, or you just want to, dabble in being an entrepreneur. If you're launching something that is not just your job or even just your career, and you want to be better at it, as a professional, this podcast is for you. And I want you to consider jumping on and throwing some questions on there, because she's an amazing woman. And if you miss out on the opportunity to ask these questions, you may never get the chance to do it again. Substantial_podcast. Love you. Okay, so here's something I wanted to tell you. I saw this yesterday and I thought it was so amazing. Robert Kennedy Jr. Is it Robert Kennedy?
Yeah.
Okay, he's going for president right now. For the Democratic side, which really he feels like he's a Republican.
I know.
Hidden in Democratic clothing, right? And so he said this, and I thought it was so incredibly interesting. He said that during COVID, he was basically saying, one of the things that I would want to do is I would want to ask Trump and Biden about the lockdowns. He said, why did you do that? We lost $16 trillion, right? But here's the main thing that he said I thought was so interesting, specific to our podcast and what we're talking about. He said that I think it was 30 million businesses went under in that time, just ceased to exist.
Right.
Don't get me wrong. It was a learning experience for any president, for anybody, right? This was new to everyone. If you went out of business, obviously that's a tough thing, right?
Sure.
I mean, the economy, that should tell you how to vote, period. But we're not going to get political on this, right? But number two, if you are still in business, you went through one of the toughest times the entire world has ever been through.
That's the truth.
And if you're still sticking it out, or if maybe you just launched, we launched our business during COVID. My wife has a cake business, Sweet Made, which you know. She does luxury cakes, and they're a spectacle. Every cake that she makes is, people will line up and be like, oh my God, this is so amazing.
Right.
If you went through that and you're still standing, you can go through anything.
Right.
Many of the people that we work with the Entrepreneur Collective, they're starting their business after that, meaning they're not starting in the hardest economy ever. I mean, don't get me wrong, the economy is going through some stuff right now, right? But they're outside of COVID.
Right.
And I think now's the best time to start something.
If God has put that on your heart, if you have enough resources to do it, if you don't just do it, you probably never will, And I think that was one of your questions, is how in the world did I even decide to do this? And Jordan was looking for a house. It was in that price point where, by the end of the day, these houses would have 6-7 offers on them. And she was working. And so she's like, I can't go during the week. And I said, I'll go with Kathy. I know what you want. And if we see it, we'll call you. You can come look at it during your lunch hour or whatever. And we can have an offer in, so it was so intricate, all that we had to do. And I was so closely working with Kathy because we were trying to make sure Jordan could get this house, that when we were almost done with the whole thing, I looked at Scott and I said, I think I could do this. Yeah. And so I thought, let me give it a try. Honestly, even when you called me about entrepreneur, I still have trouble with that. Like, am I an entrepreneur? I never really thought about it that way.
The answer is yes.
We've always been, and we still are, very involved in church, but even more so, especially when my kids were in school. I was very involved in school. I coached. I was on school board. I was always, really working 50, 60 hours a week in volunteer hours. But I remember we were that busy that I had like literally 6 weeks in the summer I drove by the SABOR, the Board of Realtors, and I said, okay, when's your next set of classes start? Because I said, here's where I can go through and just do boom, boom, boom and get them all done. And it was exactly those 6 weeks that I had off. And I thought, okay, step one, okay, God, I'll sign up. So I signed up for class. And I mean, I walked into class with my satchel. I had highlighters. I had note cards. I had my first week, had my first test, calling everybody, pray for me. It's my first test, and did well on it. But what was so cool about that whole thing was all these young people, we ended up talking about the Lord during this time. They would say, Miss Sandy, would you pray for us so that we, So I'm like, you know what, God, if I never sell a house, you used me to witness. Some doors. Yeah, you used me to be able to feed into these kids' lives, into these people's lives. And, I still see them sometimes. I had a client who was very much into crystals and all that kind of stuff, which she was wonderful, sweet girl. And we found him a house. And I'll never forget, something I do with a lot of my clients is when we're going to put an offer in, we just hold hands and we just pray that God would direct everything and close a door if it's not supposed to be theirs. And
I'm sure you've never had pushback on that, right?
I have not.
Yeah.
I haven't. I always ask, before I do it. But this one was like, okay, this could be, and the Lord's like, just ask her.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay. So I'm like, do you mind if I pray about this? It's so funny. She's smoking. She goes, stamps on her cigarette. Yeah. Yes, let's pray. And she has, and she's referred several people to me. And, probably we don't agree on a lot of things. Like you were saying, we don't talk politics or anything like that. And there may be a lot of things, but I think she's going to remember that about me. And so that's a win for me.
Is there somebody that you admire, somebody that maybe it's a mentor, maybe it's somebody that you aspire to be more like, that maybe influenced you, and if so, how would you say that you've done certain things to change yourself, or not change yourself, but to better yourself to be more like that person?
Scott will talk about that in our marriage. My sister and my brother-in-law were, somebody that we watched, and we watched them raise kids, and our friends were older and we watched them, and we thought, okay, we're going to learn and we're going to glean from that. And so I think I've kind of always built on that. I will say on some levels, I've learned from what they've done good. And I've even learned from what they've done that I'm like, I may not,
I don't want to do that.
I need to do that. Yeah. I can't put a face on it because it's really been community.
Yeah.
Kind of similar probably to your collective that you've got.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's really about that. I think it's necessary. I mean,
Absolutely.
We all have our strengths, but I think in community is where we build each other up and go, let's do this together and aspire to be better together.
I really genuinely hope and pray and push this group.
Yeah.
Like I want them to realize, because in my own experience and my wife's experience and some of the people like Manny Ramirez, who owns Viva La Calle, I know for a fact that being a part of a community, especially one that is aligned with your vision or on the same page, are going to help you grow. Because my next question was going to be, if you didn't have an entrepreneur family, where would you go? Because there are a lot of entrepreneurs who don't have an entrepreneur family.
I think it's great that as a group of believers.
Yes.
Because I think we know that we need each other on so many different levels within the church. And we've heard this from the pulpit, the church goes beyond the four walls.
Absolutely.
The Lord says to study to show ourselves approved. Again, I believe that means the word, but I also believe that means in what we do out in the community. Follow-ups.
People don't typically buy the first time they talk to you about something. It takes a while.
It does.
I mean, for example, my wife and I we're like probably...
You're my favorites.
Yeah, thank you. But we've probably
You've been my longest search ever.
That's funny.
That's okay.
Okay, so, but what I'm saying is, the follow-up process is huge. In the wedding business, follow-ups is incredibly, so much competition. What I've learned in the past is if they're saying yes, this is my really pushy sales business in the past, which is they're not saying no, they're just saying not right now.
Right. Sure.
And so one thing I learned from a mentor one time was if you just smile when you're on the phone, people can feel and hear your smile.
Oh, yeah.
Is there anything that you do when you focus on your follow-ups?
I was a dental hygienist. That's what I went to college for. Obviously, I'm cleaning their teeth, so we're chatting, and they would say something. I would click, okay, their daughter's getting married in June, or their son is graduating college, and I would write that down. So when they came back for their next cleaning, I'm like, tell me how the wedding went. And they would look at me like, how did you remember that?
Absolutely.
And Scott does that.
Yeah.
He, kind of we both did it separately, but he does that. And he's always like, his clients are like, just blown away. So I'll say like, oh, how was that vacation? Or, did your husband end up getting that job or something like that? Just how can I pray for you?
And you've done that with us 100%.
Yeah. And then for my clients that I do follow through with, I try to do anniversary gifts for them.
That's awesome.
And what I've been doing lately, and it's been the coolest thing because people are posting it, I would send them a magnolia tree. To plant in their yard.
Yeah.
And I get so many photos of these trees still showing me the blooms on them, or they'll post, this is my tree that I got, so cool. It goes back to what we've been taught years ago. Send a thank you note.
Yes.
Thank you for your time.
Absolutely.
Even if they didn't do a thing, it's just like, I really appreciate that you sat with me or even considered me. You didn't use me. That's good. There's so many agents out there, great agents that I know you're going to be served well, but thank you for giving me your time. Spiel. Yeah.
Okay. So I want to ask you a couple speedy questions.
Great.
My wife asked this one. She says, what are 1 to 3 pieces of advice for young female entrepreneurs?
Don't be afraid, because I was afraid.
Really?
There was an old deodorant commercial thing that never let them see you sweat.
Yeah.
Walk in there like you know exactly what you're doing, even if you don't, and nobody's really going to know the difference.
That's good.
And I think it's twofold. I think obviously it shows the confidence that you have in yourself. And then I think too, once you've done it, you might screw it up the first time, but you're going to learn how to do it right.
Yeah.
So fake it till you make it. And
Absolutely.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Fine, I got a question.
Oh.
Love it. Okay, so let's go with that one first.
They want to know, what do you do if somebody just doesn't want to purchase? That's going to happen. That's going to happen when you walk in a store, when you're selling your MacBooks or trucks or cars or whatever. Not everybody's going to do it. I say then you just go on to the next one and keep doing it. Do not let it discourage you. And it can be discouraging. I've had deals that go all the way to the very end and they freak out and they're like, I can't do it. And I
won't do that to you, I promise.
And I really do think for every no, you're going to get 2 yeses. Remember
That's a good ratio, by the way.
It is.
For every no, you're going to get 2 yeses.
I have.
Sandy, if your ratio is for every no, you get 2 yeses, then you're killing it. Because for me, it's for every 10, 15 no's, I'll get 1 yes. What's the best win you've had in the last year? This is from my wife as well.
Oh, she's got some good questions.
She does, actually.
I was on the sell side when they bought a house, say. So I was listing the house, and they had an agent who brought them, and they bought it. Well, then they wanted to sell it, and they came to me, not the agent that they worked with before. And I was totally on the other side. I mean, I didn't give them my information, obviously, because I wasn't working with them. And I asked them, I said, gosh, I'm so honored to work with you, and they said, you did more for us than our agent did on the other side. You were representing the sellers. And I had that happen twice this year. And to me, that was probably, the biggest pat on the backs from the Lord to say, you're being watched even when it's not your client.
I remember all of those moments. And I think that when you're an entrepreneur, I think those moments really make you feel good. For example, I worked at the worst, most negative connotation place ever. It's called Cons. Have you ever heard of Cons? Cons is big in San Antonio, furniture, electronics. They're known to be really pushy, aggressive, mean sometimes,
Right.
not considerate of the customer, saying this is not the right time. But I was never that kind of person. And so when I worked there, I was very positive, very loving, very encouraging to people that walked in, and I remember this lady wrote a letter, sent it in, and I just remember that I wanted to carry myself in a different way than I wasn't going to let this place change who I was.
Exactly.
That letter meant a lot to me, and I don't say that to boast, but like
No.
for somebody to recognize that. And so now whenever I see somebody doing a good job, I will leave a review and talk about the good job, and
Yeah.
sometimes a bad job too, right? I mean, but
Sure.
mostly the good stuff. I think one of the things that I like about you the most is that those moments are important to you. And because those moments are important to you, you will carry yourself in a way, and every interaction in
Right.
that way.
And that's the thing is I'm just trying to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And like, I think if somebody notices that, it's
For
like,
sure.
okay, it's just that verification that you're doing
Yeah.
you're doing it right.
If the people listening to this podcast were to take one thing from this, you just said a minute ago that when you start and you got your real estate license, there were already people ready to buy from you. Any business I ever got into, like I sold computers for a while, and I remember people, they would buy anything that I was selling.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like they
Right.
just wanted to buy from me because they knew that whoever I was, or the experience that I gave them. And in the same way, people just wanted to buy it from you. And
Right.
I feel like that is the most valuable piece of information that we can give people.
Right.
If you're selling whatever it is you're selling as a Christian entrepreneur,
Right.
but people just know you to
Right.
be that type of person,
Right.
they're going to go to
Yeah.
you first.
I hope that they know that they can trust me, that whether it happens or not, or whatever, I'm still going to give them 150% of me.
Yeah.
However it turns out, it's going to be okay.
What advice would you give someone who's starting or wants to start their business? I already think you got some good ones. Don't be afraid. Number 2, carry yourself in a way that's who you are. Don't change.
Right.
And people will buy, you, right? I mean, really.
Sell yourself.
Yeah.
For sure. 100%. I mean, that's really what we have to do. And I think that's where some of the fear comes from, because I did not have the level of confidence that I have now. Not even close. I worked very hard to get through that with counseling, with just prayer partners, and really just soul searching and inner healing that I went through, to where I realized who I was in Christ. Maybe before you try to start going and being something, make sure that you are solid. It's kind of what my talk's going to be about.
Yeah.
Your foundation is very solid in Christ. I think it's very easy to take it out there and then use that same foundation to build your business. And if you are as confident as you are in who you are in Christ, then you should be just as confident as who you can be in business.
I love that. Sandy, would you say this was fun? I enjoyed this.
It's great. Yeah.
I love it. I love
Yeah.
getting a different side of you. Although, honestly, this is kind of the side that I always see. You're such a fun person.
I really
and
appreciate. Yeah, it's fun
open.
to talk about it.
So for our audience, where can people follow you?
This is-
Sandra.kw Realtor.
There you go, because that is
I
what
just
I
knew.
am not good at.
Yeah. Social.
Yeah. And also, I am part of a team. It's called Living SA Team.
Ooh.
And so it's the Living SA Team, Keller Williams or KW Realty. That's on. They don't have Instagram right now. We're working on that, but we do have Facebook. We're working on a website. And
What could people get from following you or watching or going to that site?
so they could find, if they're looking for certain homes or different areas, they can also find kind of homes that all Keller Williams has, even through the city. And then they would have a link to reach out to me if they've got a question about any homes, or say, gosh, I like this area, but I don't see any homes I like. Well, let me see if I can maybe delve a little deeper and find something for you.
Nice.
I think, the internet is a great tool. And I think that there was a time when everybody thought that real estate would go totally to this iBuyer thing, this open doors or the offer pads and all that. And they're great. I mean, they're out there but I think there's nothing like a person opening a front door for you,
Yeah.
doing their homework, preparing themselves to say, okay, here's what your taxes are going to look like. This is what the HOA is.
That's been a big help for us too.
Yeah, the roof, this is the age of the roof, that kind of a thing. There's nothing like having that person. And I think that I feel like hopefully we've come through that to where people are realizing that having an actual agent to ask those questions to. And again, we really are, especially on the buy side, if you're looking to buy a house, talk to an agent. They're going to give you the steps of what you need to do to make it not so scary and to see exactly what your time frame is. Your time frame might not be now. It might be later, but let's figure that out.
Yeah.
So,
and of course, consider following us, Substantial Podcast. We want to give you the substance, the real stories, and the nitty gritty that is going to help you grow your business and launch the right way, and also on a firm, God-centered foundation.
Amen. That's right.
And so that's what our focus is. So of course, consider liking, sharing, comment, ask some questions on here. We would love, I'm going to send her some of those questions and she'll answer them.
For sure.
And also help us to be prepared for the next speaker. So you can always count on us to give good quality stuff for you to start your business.
Awesome.
Okay, I was going up.
Oh, sorry. See, I'm old.
Yeah, that's on me. Okay.